Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining. Today we are talking about Lord of the Rings, the card game, and specifically like strategy tips for new players. So this game just got re-released as a revised core set under the FFG brand, and we thought that, all right, we thought it'd be fun to, gather some experts here, which is absolutely not me. That is John and Jason, Istari, and D20 here to help talk about some of the strategy tips that they have found useful for newer players as they're approaching the game, because this is a fairly complex game, right? There are a lot of different action windows, a lot of different timing things that are pretty critical. And so throughout this video, we'll kind of talk about some of the tips that we have found that's helped us and some of those like weird things that, is going to make your journey in Lord of the Rings a lot more successful. So with all that being said, how are y'all doing tonight?
Good.
Great.
I'm doing well. I'll skip this whole video for you right now. Just get good. That's the
Get
secret.
good.
Get good. That's
Yep.
the secret. That's what I was told. Just get good. And I was like, okay, and I'm still working on it. So.
Yeah. How did that work out for you?
I win some, I lose some.
Oh man, how you doing, Istari? John?
Doing great. Good times.
Good. Excellent. Well, so let's just go ahead and hop into it. Let's talk about Lord of the Rings. So we are going to kind of give a brief overview. What is it? So Lord of the Rings is a customizable deck building and card game. And so there are 10 years worth of expansions at this point, which I think we're going to be getting re-releases of. I'm not quite sure if that's been 100% confirmed, but I think that they would probably be pretty crazy not to be re-releasing all of their old stuff. But we are looking at a lot of expansions, but it is fully playable out of the core box. If you buy this box that you see on the left part of the screen, or the right part of the screen for that matter, you can play it as soon as you open the pack. And so that's what it is. But honestly, if you're buying this, you're probably going to be buying some more content, because it's a lot of fun to have more heroes, more encounters, more enemies, more fun stuff. So the objective is to complete the scenario, and each one of these scenarios is a journey, and it tells a story, which is really great. And the stories throughout these different boxes run together, and so you get a full story as you're completing each individual scenario. These have multiple stages, and you have to get through them. We're going to get a little bit more into this here in a second. So let's talk about how we complete quest. So Jason, how do we complete quest? Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
I can. So basically your heroes have a quest point value, right? And you can either commit your heroes, you can have allies and commit some of them. And basically you're trying to overcome the amount of points that the enemies out on the board have, minus any active location, and then basically whatever's left over goes on to the quest. Simple as that. And then as you can see on the card that's right there on the 1B side in the bottom, has a 7 in the corner, right? So once you hit 7, you can advance to the other side, or I'm sorry, to the next quest card, or you win the game, or maybe something else happens. No spoilers or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of these quests have ways that they mess with it. So it's like you need to have a certain amount of enemies killed before you can start placing progress tokens. And so I don't know how much of that we really see in the core box, but as we start to expand the game, we start to see that a little bit more. But yeah, so I mean, it sounds simple, right? All you have to do is put these tokens on the quest card. How hard could it be? Well, it gets pretty difficult. So how does the gameplay work? I'm going to run through this real quick. So it's played in multiple turns and rounds separated into phases. There is a penalty at the end of the round where you have to raise your threat. And so threat is a huge part of this game. And once you reach 50 threat, you threat out and you lose. Or you're eliminated from the game if you're playing in multiplayer. And so you can't just take forever. You have to figure out how to complete the quest in a reasonable amount of time. You're given starting characters, and you can acquire more during each round or the turn. So we'll go into how you can play those allies from your hand, or other crazy ways to get them. Characters can fight. I mean, this is Lord of the Rings. We're going to be fighting. And then we also have characters have the ability to work towards their quest. And so, very brief, high overview. We just wanted to lay out the groundwork, but really the meat of this video is going to be a little bit more, strategic value. So let's look at this. So the played in turns / rounds separated into different phases. This is where I think Lord of the Rings gets its complexity, because there are a lot of different phases. So there are 7 different phases, where each one of these are broken up into different action window timings. Things have to work in very specific order, and it can get very cumbersome. And so some of these are pretty easy, some of these are pretty quick and easy to understand. But then the quest phase, I'm still learning things about timing it during the quest phase as of today, and I've been playing for a couple months now. So those are the.
I think that's. Yeah. I just want to stress on that for a second, because there are sheets and help guides out there that talk about action windows, and action windows are just huge. I mean, just really quick. Defending, you declare attacking enemy, player action. Exhausted defender, if any, player action. Resolve shadow effect, if any, player action. Determine combat damage, player action. Then the next player, and there's more player action. So it's non-stop player action windows, and it's really important to really truly understand these rounds inside and out.
Yeah. And so player actions can be events played from your hand, or maybe you can trigger an ability on either an ally or a hero in play. And I think it was actually you, Jason, that described it to me this way. It was if you think you can do it at that point, you probably can.
Yes. Yes. So, it's very rare that you can't.
It is very rare that you cannot. John actually sent me a amazing guide that breaks it down, step by step on when you can do anything. And I will link that guide in the description below. And so I highly recommend printing that out and using it for your first couple of run throughs, because it is a very, easy to follow guide, and helps outline all of that. So.
And I just want to throw a few points on here that some of these will always happen, and then some of these phases you kind of have the option. So resource phase, you're always going to do that. You're always going to get resources. In planning phase, you're always going to kind of decide what cards am I going to play and what am I going to pay for. But then when you get into the questing and the combat phase, that's kind of where you decide what you want your characters to really focus on. Do I want all of their energies to the questing, or do I want to save some back for defending and attacking monsters? And then the refresh phase always happens. So you've kind of got the first and the last phases always kind of happen. The ones in between is where you kind of decide how you want to play it out.
Yeah. And that is something that you will grow to know and love and hate all at the same time. It's trying to figure out what you want your characters to do.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And also, just FYI, you can only optionally engage one enemy. I see a lot of people make that mistake a lot. They're they get all gung ho. They're I'm going to take out 3 easy enemies. No, you're not.
Yep. So we're going to break down each one of these points just a little bit more. So players choose starting characters and they can acquire more throughout the game. So John, talk to me a little bit about the different heroes. So I think a lot of people that are watching this probably just have the core box. And so without spoiling anything, talk to me about some of the heroes and what that means and why you want to pick specific heroes.
Yeah, certain heroes have certain, inherent traits, they're maybe stronger at questing, maybe they're stronger at defending, maybe they're stronger in attacking. So there's those variables. But then there's the spheres, is the 4 spheres where resources are paid from. So certain spheres kind of focus maybe more on, there's the tactics one. So anything to do with tactics is more combat oriented. The other spheres, the lore sphere, maybe has more healing, that kind of stuff. Mind blank.
Spirit.
Yeah, spirit helps a lot with threat, that kind of stuff. And leadership has a lot of abilities that can affect other cards. So not just the hero card that you're using, but any allies or other heroes can be affected. So you've kind of got like the inherent stats of like the straightforward stats of attacking, defending, but then the special abilities can vary depending in which sphere you end up choosing. So it's not an easy task really to start. Like you might say, well, I'm just going to fight, so I'm going to take all tactics and just fight my way through. But some of the quests, you need cards from the other spheres to get through them, and if you don't have heroes with those, sphere resources, you kind of get stuck. So it's a balancing act of, not having mediocre stats. Maybe you want a couple cards that have really high stats in certain areas, but you kind of want to be well rounded for the most part.
Yeah, and so we get up to 3 heroes, and so typically when I'm running decks, I'm running what we would call like a tri-sphere deck. So one hero from each different sphere, which I play a lot of solo, and so with solo you have to cover a lot of the game. And what I've realized is that it's so hard to not have one hero from any of those spheres, right? I feel like if you don't have a tactics hero on the table, you're really gonna have to figure out what to do during combat because you just don't have access to the tools that you need, and or like like a leadership. Like some of the leadership cards, especially in the core box, are phenomenal. Like Steward of Gondor, right? I don't know how I would win without a leadership. So you have to run leadership, but you can't ignore the healing and card draw with lore, and so that means you're running out of spirit. But spirit also is like the high questing, so it's like, okay, now I need to just kind of, I don't know what to do. Like I'm out of options at this point. So it's always a fun, and we're going to talk about deck building here a little bit more later, but it's always just like, a fun puzzle to try and figure out. And it's almost like, which one are you going to leave out?
Yeah, it's almost like 3 is not enough. It's like, well, I have to play with 5 because
Right.
5 will solve my problem, but you can't. So
Right. Yep. Alrighty. And then those are the heroes. So starting out with 3, but throughout the game, you can add allies to your deck. And so what are some of the allies? What are some of the benefits of allies, Jason?
Cannon fodder. They're just good for dying, really. That's
Pit
really
finders.
what it comes down to. Yeah. But yeah, no, it allows you to quest easier. They allow you, obviously to attack, to defend, all that fun stuff. But there are some cards that really play well off of others. I mean, recently I did a whole dwarf deck, and there's certain dwarf cards played off of other dwarf cards, right? So all of them have they're kind of like their little, I don't know if special ability is the right word, but something that makes them unique and makes them different. So it's really kind of key to look at those ally cards, see how they play off of each other. More importantly, see how they play off your hero, and then use them, yes, as questing, as attack, and to just be neat shields.
Right. Yeah. The because any character can attack, any character can quest, any character can defend, and it's like, which ones do you want to use where? So
yeah,
it's they're fun puzzles. So let's talk a little bit more. So we just mentioned that they can do a lot of everything, but just to break it down a little bit more. So characters can perform 1 of 3 actions per round. And so this is, I would say, typically. There are cards that allow you to do more, but the majority of the time you are either going to quest, you are either going to attack, or you are going to defend. There's really, or I guess you could do none of that and have a bad time, but but you're gonna have to figure out one of these things to do. And I think where good players start to grow is understanding, I could commit this 3 willpower to this quest, but then this troll is going to come and kill me. So yeah. I need to figure out where to use my characters. And so any tips on that, like as we're starting out, we're in the resource phase, how do you all make that decision on, okay, maybe Eowyn's always going to quest, let's be honest, but how am I going to use Gimli this round? What are some of the things running through your mind that help you kind of determine what that is, what you're going to be using Gimli for this round?
Yeah, John, you can go first.
Yeah, I think certainly looking at what's in the staging area has a big part of that. So if there's no monsters in the staging area, then I might be more apt to spend have more characters do more questing, because I know I don't have to defend or attack. Possibly it's never 100%, but if there's no monsters in the staging area, I might lean towards trying to get through some of the locations and some of the quest points that are needed. But if there's monsters in the staging area, then it's like, hey, are they going to come at me if the threat's high enough, or do I have the option to fight them on my own terms when I'm ready? So it's kind of those three things. If my threat's high and something comes out and I know I'm going to have to fight them this round, then I'm going to try to get by with the minimum amount of willpower, but to be ready to defend and hopefully, be able to attack back, because you don't want to be stuck round after round with this, monster,
Yeah.
tying you up. So you kind of want to, quick and dirty. You want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. But then there's that balance of, well, hey, if I just focus on that and I'm not applying enough willpower to questing, then then your threat gets higher. So it's that balancing act. But really,
And then the
just
monsters are going to come get you.
Yeah.
that's right. So really, just what's in the staging area is probably the biggest one for me.
One thing that I know is true about this game is that if there are no monsters in the staging area and I quest with all of my characters, the worst possible monster
Yep.
will be flipped into that staging area and immediately lose the game. That is the one thing I know for a fact about this game.
Fact check, true. That absolutely happens. What I will say is, especially for stuff you're going to face in the core box, probably the first cycle, this all holds true for that. Later on in the game, not really spoiler alert, things will start to change, and the way you play has to change, which is what makes this game so amazing. But early on, what I will say is I play the game in 3 sections. I have played a beginning game, which is just about building out, right? I'm just trying to build out. I'm trying to hang on. I'm trying not to take that much threat. I'm trying not to have that many enemies in my stage. I'm literally hanging on so that I can get to the mid stage, where my deck, it feels like it's really singing, right? Like I'm flying through this, I'm knocking things out, I'm questing well, whatever. But I'm always one treachery card, one big bad villain away, or monster, whatever they're calling this game now. One big bad guy for being kind of knocked down a peg, and that always kind of pushes me towards the end game, where it almost feels like I'm sprinting, right? Like I don't have time to build that anymore. We're too deep in everything. I kind of need to start really hustling along, and I only have like a handful of turns before I'm gonna lose. So to me, I always think of it in that 3-stage scenario, right? Just building out. Once I feel like I'm decently built out and enough so that I can start really, kind of flying through the game, start doing that until I get hit hard with a treachery or something terrible. And then I'm just trying to hang on and go through it. So not the best strategy at times, but it works. It's worked through the entire game.
So I really like what you said there, Jason, which kind of brings us to our next point, which the encounter deck is there to slow you down. So we have talked about building out our deck, and now like you have to fight it against something, and that's this encounter deck. And this is generated depending on the specific scenario. It will tell you kind of what modular sets to shuffle into a deck, which can increase the difficulty. And this Lewis, this troll. He's I think he's from one of the expansions. He's from Conflict at the Carrick, I believe. Yeah. He is not fun to hang out with. He's not fun. So there are 3 main things that come out of this encounter deck. So we have locations. So John, can you talk to me about locations real quick?
Yeah, I guess the easiest way is to consider like a buffer between what you're trying to do and trying to complete a quest. So when a location sits in the staging area, you have to count that number in the top left. You have to count that as actual threat. So and if you leave that card in there, each round you have to discount that threat. So you invariably want to get rid of those cards, and so there's a location spot. So each round you can choose to take one of those locations and basically go visit it to get rid of it. So you kind of it's like a one step to getting rid of it. So and you can only go one location at a time, and all the numbers are always different. So like in this case, it looks like the threat is 1, but once it becomes a location, you have to apply 6 questing points to get rid of it. So you have to look at each location and go, which one's a quick win versus, hey, this thing's, it's giving me 6 extra points a turn, and I don't have enough, and I got to do something about it. So they're always, locations are always there to stop you from applying points to your main quest. So if you need 20 points for your main quest, and you've got a location card, whatever points are required on that location card have to be subtracted first. So you can't just bypass it and just keep putting questing points on the actual quest. You have to, the location is in the way, and you have to apply points to it and get rid of it. So, and they all have their own, some of them have their own little tricks or things that slow you down. Sometimes there's a bonus, like, hey, you get to draw an extra card, but a lot of times it's like,
usually it's not.
Yeah, usually not.
So.
Yeah.
No, and I think that brings up a really good point, John, is that you don't always have to travel to the location. And I think this is a thing that I struggle with early on. It's like, no, it's there, I should travel to it. But like a card like this, if it's only 1 affecting me versus 6 I have to put on, that's a huge difference. So that's a really good point to bring up.
But to counter that point, I have said that too many times. I have said that enough where I'm like, oh, I don't need to travel. And then you flip the next one. You're like, I'm not going to travel. I'm just going to see if I can push. And then very quickly you can get what like some people call location locked, where they're just, you can't travel fast enough. And so I don't necessarily know how to explain that, but I mean, it just comes with experience and understanding what is in that encounter deck and knowing what locations can be flipped up, because this is a game that every single scenario will play differently. So there are scenarios that are really heavy with locations and you better be traveling. There are some scenarios that, they're a little bit lighter and it's a lot of enemies, or maybe you want to just rush. And so it's kind of scenario specific, but you do have to be careful because you don't want to always be traveling because you will never progress, and you don't want to never travel because you'll very quickly be running up against 15-20 threat per player and then you lose. So it's all fun stuff. But
And I will tell you that the Nightmare version of Lewis right there, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's really nice.
Are you trying to convince me to buy the Nightmare decks right now?
Yeah, you should buy every single one. Do you like bashing your head and losing constantly over and over and over? These decks are for you.
I do that with the core stuff.
Oh, okay. Do I do it more? Do you miss that feeling?
Yeah.
Do it without the helmet. That's what it's like.
Yeah, right?
Oh, man. So that was the first. Locations are part of that encounter deck. The enemies are another part of that encounter deck. And so, Jason, talk to me about some of the enemies that we're going to see and what we need to be looking out for with those.
So generally when enemies come out, there are sometimes when revealed effects that you have to pay attention to. I usually accidentally end up skipping them because I'm just not paying enough attention, because I always flip the enemy and I go straight to, okay, how much is it going to hit me for? How much am I going to have to hit it? And I always kind of forget about that stuff. So again, recognize it's when revealed stuff. Recognize a lot of times, especially this card right here, like Lewis right here, has a response to things that you do. So this is to me what kind of makes the game complicated, is that it's not just a straight up enemy you're attacking. Like there is stuff that happens on top of each of those attacks and you have to pay attention to, that you have to know. And then when you have 3 or 4 of those enemies, it makes it worse. So that's the general gist of enemies of what you're going to be dealing with.
And Lewis does have friends. If you play Conflict, you know that, but if you haven't, just Lewis has some friends. But
yeah, Morris, Stewart, and Rupert are all great people, I hear.
Yep. So yeah, that's the enemies. And then the final thing that we have are the treachery cards. These are like the enemy's event cards, right? So we can build out our decks with event cards, and the enemy gets those as well. And those are, you would flip them up, and it's usually exciting, right? You're not adding threat to the staging area, but typically it's way worse than that, right? You'd rather flip up a location, or you would rather flip up a enemy than flip up one of these treachery cards, because some of these can be nasty. So I mean, like, I'm trying to think of some of them that are just really poor in the core set. Do any pop to mind for you all?
Hold on. I have to look it up because there are some because this is the one things that we talk about with this game is that like there's some player cards in there that are stupidly hard, right? All right, I'm sorry, player cards that are stupidly good. But there are some treacheries. They're just way awful. Hold on.
It's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly that, I mean, the one there where he's hitting for 4 in terms of defense, I mean, there aren't that many cards that you can defend with 4. So, you know, you're already thinking, am I just going to use like the chump block ally that Jason would, or do I have a hero that I can somehow build up that, the hero can actually take that amount of damage and survive a couple rounds. So that's certainly I think any monster that's hitting for more than 3 and 4 are ones that you really have to think about, how am I going to survive? I mean, the ones where they're hitting for ones and twos, that's not a big deal, but it's those big guys that are hitting for 3 or 4 that can really kind of end your game, no matter no matter what you've done to that point.
Yep.
So the arguably the worst treachery in the game happens in the second cycle, second adventure pack, Road to Rivendell. Nelson, did you do that one yet? Road?
Yeah.
Okay, so arguably the worst
That's
treachery.
literally the one I played on Monday.
Okay, Sleeping
Sleeper.
Sentry.
Yep.
The worst card.
Sleeper,
Deal 1 damage
yeah.
to each exhausted character, then exhaust all ready characters. Who does that? Who has a
die.
card that like it's just done?
Yeah.
You can't do anything for the rest of the round, and if things start attacking you, you're done. You're just done. So it's a terrible card. It's a real. I mean, just design wise, it doesn't exactly make sense.
Yeah.
but it's nuts.
It's
Yeah.
brutal. And so I talked in my stream on Monday when I knew that card was potential to come in, and it's if you don't have a defense for it, depending on the game state, that is you lose when you draw that card.
And the shadow effect, I'm sorry, I forgot the worst part of it because I got so up in arms about this, was the shadow effect is defending player must discard all exhausted characters he controls.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
Okay, game's over. Got it.
Yep. Yep. So the treachery cards can be absolutely brutal. They can absolutely destroy your strategies. And so I really like the Spirit Sphere for this reason, because they have cards in there like a Test of Will. So this is a card that I don't know if I've run a deck in my progression playthrough that has not had at least a copy of a Test of Will in there, which is cancel a when revealed effect on a card when it gets revealed. And so like that sleeping card that sounds super bad and is super bad, if you are able to spend 1 spirit resource, you can cancel that effect. And so depending, you always have to have an understanding of what type of treacheries are in that deck and how you are going to deal with them. So just getting to understand the different deck and how it plays.
Yep.
But let's dive into each one of these phases a little bit more and talk about some of the things that some of the tips and tricks that we have. So we've kind of talking about it. So the first thing that we do on a turn is quest. So this is broken up into a couple of different stages, or a couple of different phases in the quest phase. So John, can you talk me through what the quest phase looks like and some of the tips and tricks that you have found throughout playing the game for that you would want people to know?
Yeah, I'll do as best as I can. So certainly, what's in the staging area gives you an indication of, how many quest points do I actually have to come up with to apply points to the main quest. So you don't even want to break even. Like break even's great, but you're not actually making any progress. So,
Yep.
You look at what's in the staging area. It's like, well, hey, I need more points than what's in the staging area, and that's and that's without even drawing another card. So you have to have extra points there to apply to either a location you might still have or to the main quest. But it's kind of like a guessing game because you're going to draw a card after you've committed your points to the quest. So I mean, there are some cards that let you see that, but I mean, for the most part, you kind of have to anticipate, okay, when that encounter card, comes up, how many points do I think it's going to have, and then have I applied enough to it? So that's kind of the biggest thing, is to make sure you've got enough points going into into what's in the staging area, plus anticipating what's coming up. So I mean, there's a handful of cards that let you see the encounter deck face up, which really helps, because then you're like, oh, I know exactly how many points I need, and I know exactly what's going to come up. But I mean, those cards are few and far between in the starter.
And it's your favorite. Your favorite
Yeah.
hero does that, right?
Yeah,
Denethor does that.
Yeah, he definitely does. And now those characters that you've applied to the quest are now exhausted, so you can't use them to do anything else in that round. So I mean, there are some cards that can unexhaust you or ready you to get back into it to do something else. But for the most part, you can do one thing, and if you quest, you're not going to do anything else.
Yep. One of the things that I just recently learned that changes the game completely is that when the quest phase is broken up, that you commit characters to your quest. So you would exhaust characters that could be heroes or allies before you have flipped the card. So say if I'm questing for 10 and there's 6 in the staging area right now, I'm probably hoping and assuming that it's going to be maybe a 2, right? So I'm hoping to put 2 progress tokens on the current quest. Then you go through the staging you go through the staging phase. So you flip the top card and add it to the staging area, resolve any win revealed effects, and then you don't immediately place your tokens. There is a action window in between the staging area, or the staging part, and then the resolution part of the questing phase, where you can play cards or you can take actions that can modify your results. So like a very common one that makes Eowyn just so great. So Eowyn is a sphere hero, or is a spirit hero that has 4 willpower, and she has an ability that says, you, as an action, any player, max once per player per round, can discard a card to give her +1 willpower. So that action can actually be taken after you've revealed the card. So if I actually revealed a 5, say it was a crazy one, and in the scenario that I described, I was questing for 10 and now it's 11, my threat would increase, but I can discard a card at that point to then break even and not increase my threat. So understanding the action windows, which we will link that very helpful document below, is just super critical and super great to understand to help that. So alrighty, so once we have put everything into the questing or the staging area, then we have to make engagement checks. So Jason, what are engagement checks?
So basically, if the what is the threat on what is the technical word for their top left thing? It's not their willpower. You have willpower.
I think it's their threat.
Is their threat? Okay.
It's threat, yeah.
Yeah. So their threat, if it's what is it? Lower, same as
Equal
yours.
or lower, yeah.
Equal, lower, yeah. They engage you. Now, this isn't just one enemy engages you, every single one engages you. Then on top of that, or instead of, if nothing engages you, you can optionally engage an enemy too. Again, you can only do it once, or you can only do it to one enemy optionally, but if things are engaging you, all of them are going to engage you, and it's going to make a lot of fun because you have to start fighting now. But on the bright side, their willpower or their points no longer have to count towards questing anymore. Their quest points. So there's a slight benefit, I guess, to it.
They're going to come at you swinging. And one of the another timing thing is that you optionally engage before you do any mandatory engagement checks. And so if you're playing with multiple players, if you have a tactics player that, can deal the damage, but he's not going to, he sees that, maybe the lore player who's not set up to and ready for Lewis to come attack, he can optionally engage Lewis, and so that Lewis will not engage the player that is not ready for him.
Yeah.
So after they come and engage you, your characters can defend if they would like. And so this is exhausting one of those characters, and only one. That is actually a pretty key point here, is that when you are defending, you can only choose one hero or ally to exhaust to take the attack. So that you get dealt a shadow card. So it removes, or it adds some ambiguity into the results of the attack. So Lewis here has 4 attack. So if we'll go with Denethor because I know he's John's favorite. So if Denethor is defending, Denethor has a 3 defense, and so you would exhaust Denethor at that point. And Lewis is 4 to 3, so he's going to be doing at least 1 damage to Denethor. Then you reveal your shadow card. That could be so many different things, and so many like horrible things depending on what scenario you're running. And so it could be like a +2 or a +3 if undefended. And so understanding what shadow cards are in the deck is really critical as well. And then you take the amount of damage, and if the damage has exceeded the life, then you discard that hero or ally. And then if you have anybody still unexhausted already, and this is the order that it happens, you quest, then the enemies attack, then you get to attack. So, Jason, how do you attack?
Well, you don't, because you already used everyone. So that's
or the shadow card has discarded all of your characters.
Yeah, basically. So if there's anyone left, you would look at your attack value, right? The 2 axes. And again, there's sometimes different ways to modify it to make it stronger. Sometimes there's cards that let you do it through events or whatever else. So take note of what you can or can't play. But basically, you would do an attack. Let's say it's a 3 attack. Let's say you're going against Lewis here. He blocks 2 of it automatically every single time. So you would have 1 damage left over. You put a damage on him, and once you do that 10 more times, he'll be dead. So you're almost there.
And that's a good reason why you want to have more than 1 character attack, because instead of just hitting for 1 because you lost 2B because of that shield, if someone else has 5 attack, then you're getting 5 more. So the more characters you can have jump in, the more damage you're going to do each round. Otherwise, as Jason said, it's a 10-round boxing match.
Yeah.
one at a time. You don't want to do that because you don't have time for that.
Lewis wins the 10-round boxing match.
every time. But and that's important to note, right? Is so defending, you can only defend with 1 character individually. Attacking, unless the card states otherwise, there are cards that state otherwise.
Why would you do that?
That you can only. I'm kidding. It's just that's the only thing to note, is that you can attack with multiple characters.
And you sum the attacking value. The defense isn't applied to each character.
Correct.
So, like, if you're attacking with a character with 4 and a character with 1, your total damage to Lewis after you subtract 2 would be 3.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really important. Alrighty. So let's that's kind of what we're looking at. Any kind of interesting or weird things that happen in the combat phase, which anything from defending to attacking. One of the things that I have noticed is there are cards that are faint, or that's in the core box where it's a tactics card. I think it costs 1, and it just says choose a enemy, and that enemy doesn't attack the player. Or the card Quick Strike. I didn't understand why Quick Strike was good. So Quick Strike is another tactics card that says it's an action card, and it says exhaust a hero to immediately declare it as an attacker. Why that is good is because we've been saying that it goes in this order, right? You quest, defend, then attack. Because there's an action window before the defense, you can play Quick Strike and then maybe kill an enemy before they even get to attack. So understanding timing is really critical. But what other things have you found in the combat phase that are going to be good for a newer player to understand and take advantage of?
Honestly, that's really the biggest thing is understanding, because this goes all back to action windows, in my opinion, that understanding your event cards and understanding that where the event cards can be played in those action windows, that it doesn't have to be at the very beginning of a phase or anything like that, right? It could be dispersed throughout it. So I think just really truly understanding your event cards and understanding action windows is going to help you a lot through all of that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you've got like a hero, or allies that are really have good attack values, you kind of don't want them to get tied up in questing or defending. You kind of want to keep them open so they actually can attack. So trying not to get sucked in of everyone's gonna quest, and then like a monster comes down, you can't do anything. So trying to keep your attack option open, to get rid of someone when you really have to. So
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so to kind of finish us off tonight, let's just hop into maybe an open discussion. So, what things have you found that we haven't already touched on that you have that are interesting and exciting to you, and would be good for a newer player to know? Maybe that's like in deck building, or that's just some weird rules. Like we mentioned earlier, that all the decks that come playable out of the box are monosphere, which are okay if you're playing with multiple players, but if you're playing in a lower player count, you really need to change up and maybe run 2, but probably 3 spheres to try and get the access to all the cards that you need. And when doing that, I think John, you brought up a really good point earlier, before the video started, but like understanding if you're running 2 spirit heroes and 1 leadership hero, your deck should probably be 2/3 spirit, 1/3 leadership, from a cost standpoint. And there's a great website called RingsDB that helps and does all of that math for you. So you can put in your deck and it gives you the distribution of your costs versus the sphere versus, allies versus events versus upgrades. And so we'll link that below, but that is a fantastic tool that I recommend anybody that is playing this game utilizes. So
yeah, there's nothing worse than having one hero with 10 resource tokens in front of them, and you've got a handful of cards, but the resources don't match. That's the worst. So certainly you go back and go, well, how do I fix it? Do I have the right hero? Like if you really love the cards, if you think the cards are really going to work, and you look back and go, well, do all these heroes kind of fit? So, and that's the one thing you can have like a starter deck, and you can go through, but it's important to kind of look and see what worked and what didn't work. And do I have cards in there that really didn't help me get to completing the quest? And did I have some cards that really did work well, and I'm going to keep them? So to not be so rigid that, hey, I've got this deck and I'm going to, I'm not going to change it because it may not work. The scenario you might have, it just may not work at all.
Where some of my biggest tips that I guess I've learned over it is, especially when you're first starting out, right? If you're brand new to this game, one, I would play easy, right? I play easy mode right off the bat, and just to get used to mechanics, because this game is going to punish you. There's still challenges in that core box for people who know the game inside and out. The third quest is still near impossible for solo play. It's dirty. I kind of recommend Monosphere the very first time you're playing, because to me, the hardest jumping point for a lot of people in this game is deck building. That this game does not hold your hand with deck building. It's very difficult. It is very difficult to deck build well in this game. And then when you're trying to mix and match all of these 3 spheres together, it gets really, really tough. I'm a huge fan of 2 spheres. I'm starting to lean more that way, because when you do 3 spheres, there's certain cards that just don't work, flat out don't work. But start with the 1, learn the basics, build out from there. Running 3 spheres is the best way to do it, but you could do pretty darn well with 2. And understand you're going to lose a lot. Like, you're going to lose a lot. That's half the fun of this game is honestly losing, understanding what the scenario is throwing at you and how are you going to overcome it. And don't be afraid to change your deck in between scenarios. I know a lot of people want to run their same deck all the way through. There's very few decks that can do that. I mean, as far as I know, there's like 2 or 3 decks that can truly do it all the way through everything in the game. So don't be afraid to switch things up. It's kind of what the game wants you to do. That's why it gives you new player cards each adventure pack. So
I think, and one other thing that when I first started, your monsters are coming down, you're getting swarmed. I'm like, why is this happening? And it was my threat was too high. So
Mhm.
sometimes, yeah, I want to start off with like the really big characters because I watch the movies and I want the big guns right at the beginning. But your threat starts out really high, and like you don't get a chance. As Jason said, you kind of want that first section to kind of build up. Sometimes you don't get that chance because your threat's so high. So as I started to play, I'm like, hey, having a low threat sometimes is really good because you choose when you want to engage monsters from the staging area, and it gives you time to draw some cards and kind of get the strategy that you had in mind. You can actually get those cards out and get them going, and then you've got the tools to sort of dig into the rest of the quest. So don't be afraid to pick maybe characters that aren't super powerful. You might find that the low threat really helps
Yeah.
to get things going.
Yeah, if you look at all the top decks on Rings DB, I mean, as far as I know, every single one, it's generally they follow the same pattern of they have one hero that has you know, threat that's 10 or higher, and the other two are below 10. So generally
Interesting.
speaking, it should always be below 30, essentially, roughly. But generally speaking, there's only one that goes 10 plus, and the rest go like 9 or lower. So just FYI.
Yeah, when I'm looking at a hero and it has a threat of 9 versus a threat of 10, it doesn't seem that big until you realize that that's an entire turn, right? You're playing one less turn that game because of your higher threat. You lose when you hit 50. So is it worth putting in the hero that's at 12 starting threat?
Mhm.
Or can you get by with the one that's 9 and play 3 more turns? So those are all decisions that you have to balance when you're making that call. One of the things that I think needs to be stated at least at some point in this video is how good Gandalf is. So Gandalf is an ally that, I was saying I don't think I've ever run a deck without a Test of Will. I have never run a deck without 3 copies of Gandalf in it. So Gandalf is a 5-cost ally, which is very expensive, but he can be spent. You can spend any sphere's resource from him. He's a gray card, Gandalf the Grey. So when he enters play, he has a 4 willpower, a 4 attack, and a 4 defense. And his ability states that when he enters play, you can, I think it's draw 3 cards, lower your threat by 4, or deal 5 damage to an enemy. Right? I think those are the
Something like
options.
that.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And so and then at the end of the round, you discard him from play. So he's, when you see something like Lewis that has 10 health, if you can play Gandalf twice, it kills Lewis because it ignores defense, and he doesn't have to be engaged with you. He can be in the staging area, and every single one of those options for Gandalf is really good and it's a very tactical decision on what option you need to use. My favorite combination that I've seen in this game so far is sneak attack Gandalf. So sneak attack is a 1-cost event for leadership. It says put a ally into play, and at the end of the phase, return him to your hand. Putting Gandalf into play for 1 cost, dealing 5 damage to an enemy, and questing with him for 4 points for 1 is the best value that I have seen in the game, and I don't know if it gets better than that ever.
And he goes back in your hand, so it's not like you've lost him. He goes back in your hand for later.
You can play him next turn.
Yep.
So just utilize Gandalf, especially in the core box, and probably very far into this game. Gandalf is forever. He's one of those cards that is going to be key to any deck, just because of the flexibility that he provides.
Sure.
But you cannot.
Don't even say it. Don't even say it. Don't even say it. I know what you're thinking. That's a whole nother video. We'll spend 20 minutes talking about it. I'm just kidding,
that's
right?
fair. That's fair.
It's be me ranting.
I'm looking forward to that video.
God, I'm not.
Alrighty. Anything else that you want to tell newer players or players that are looking for some strategy tips that are hopping into the game or want to up their game? Any wisdom that you want to pass along to them?
Get good.
Get good.
Yeah,
That
that's what I was told.
Yep. And I liked what you were saying earlier. Like, you will lose this game. You will lose a lot of this game. You are not expected to win this game 100% of the time. If you are, you're playing incorrectly.
Correct.
Right. So the decks that you're building need to be customly built for each scenario. There is a lot of deck building in this game, and if it's not something that you're super interested in, maybe look towards like a Champions or an Arkham, because deck building for this game is a huge part of it. So
Yeah, I will spend a night deck building. Like, not even playing the game, just deck building. And I might not even finish because there's just so much to do and go through. So, FYI.
Well, awesome. Well, if you all have any suggestions or any comments or anything that we missed or think that we're playing incorrectly, let us know in the comments, because this is a game that I am consistently and always learning more and new things and new strategies and figuring out how to implement those well. And so I love the strategy tips. Like, it's also a game that is very satisfying to me, because every single time I play, I feel like I get better at it. And it just feels, it's a good experience in that sense. So let us know in the comments what your tip for newer players or for existing players that maybe is just a little clunky, or it's a weird combination that you found, because those are really fun to find and exploit. So excellent. Well, thank you all for joining. It was a pleasure having you on, and hopefully that we help make somebody's experience with Lord of the Rings just slightly better.
And it didn't scare you away.
Yeah, it didn't. Yep, that was the main goal. Excellent. Well, until next time, happy gaming.